Hoy es 14 de agosto de 2018 y me encuentro aquí con la profesora Cait, con quien voy a llevar a cabo una entrevista para indagar acerca de sus percepciones sobre las iniciativas de la universidad en cuanto a la enseñanza del inglés. Buenos días, Cait, ¿cómo estás?
Buenos días.
Cait, te voy a ir haciendo unas preguntas, entonces pues agradecería que me contestaras pues de la manera más natural posible, de acuerdo a tu experiencia. Quedamos en que puedas contestar en inglés y eso sería quizá lo más adecuado para la máquina y pues yo hablo en español para que la máquina me entienda mejor. Entonces, empecemos con la primera categoría, que es historia y experiencia en la Universidad de los Andes. ¿Podrías contarme un poco sobre tu formación profesional? ¿Qué papel jugó? Creo que el español, ¿cierto? Es una lengua que tú has manejado desde hace tiempo, la has estudiado. ¿Qué papel jugó el español o cualquier otra lengua extranjera en tu formación? ¿Y de qué manera aprendiste esta lengua?
Okay. Well, first, thank you for inviting me to participate. Um, when I was an undergraduate in university, I studied political science, and I also minored in literature. And that was a really interesting experience because I focused on post-colonial studies in political science and also in post-colonial studies in literature. So I ended up reading a lot of the same texts from completely different viewpoints. And honestly, that's been really interesting because some of the courses here also touched on post-colonialism, the old three. So that was interesting to be able to use those that context again, which I didn't imagine I would teaching English. And after I graduated, I realized that I loved teaching. And I was awarded a scholarship to study my master's degree in curriculum and instruction. And it was a really interesting master's degree because it was very new and kind of using a lot of new techniques. So I was actually teaching while I was doing the master's in curriculum and instruction. And I made my focus area in teaching English language learners because I was working in Texas in a school that had a very high percentage of students, Latino students who were learning English. So I was able to work with that community while I was doing my research and while I was studying. So it was a really great experience to have not just the theory but also the practice to inform that, and a lot of good opportunities to do research while I was working.
Entonces, en ese momento empezaste a utilizar más tu español con la comunidad con la que trabajabas, me imagino.
Yeah, and I was able to use my Spanish most of all to be able to communicate with parents, because that's a big gap, as I'm sure you know. And in English language schools, in the U.S. school system, is not being able to communicate with parents who speak other languages, sobre todo. More than anything, Latino communities, where a big percentage of the parents are just learning English. So I was able to use it for that. I also transitioned to, for 1 year after I graduated, I taught Spanish for principiantes in Texas. And that was also really interesting to see the other side of that, where I was teaching a population that had not, was completely monolingual and starting from scratch with Spanish. So that was also really interesting, and I think it informed a lot of what I do now in terms of starting with someone who's had no experience with another language. So that was a really interesting and useful experience. I also worked in Brazil with groups of professionals. So I worked on sort of English for professional purposes, for presentations, and I mostly worked with government employees, Brazilian the employees of Brazilian ministries. So I would actually go to the ministry and work with them on certain things for conferences or presentations. So that was also an interesting sort of sub-specialty that I think has also been really helpful when talking about preparing students for professional life.
Muy interesante, Cait. Veo que tienes mucha experiencia, tanto en tu país como en otros contextos, con diferentes tipos de poblaciones, diferentes edades, diferentes contextos sociales. Yo quisiera pasar a esta pregunta.
Okay.
Donde dice, ¿podrías contarnos qué ventajas o desventajas ha traído el conocimiento del inglés a tu vida profesional?
Well, certainly, it's been very useful to have a very thorough knowledge of English. It's obviously I'm a native speaker, so it's sort of a different perspective. But I've found that even in a context that's not English as a second language, I found it useful because, for example, the graduate record exam that is just for, it's for everyone, but even native speakers need help with the verbal portion of that. And I did really well on the verbal part, not the math part, but the verbal part. And so I was able to work for a time too, preparing people for that. So not only being a native speaker, but also having a really deep knowledge of the language has been really helpful to me professionally.
Okay. Bueno, me gustaría que pasáramos a la segunda categoría, que son las perspectivas institucionales. Quisiera leerte un poquito lo que es el PDI, que es el Plan de Desarrollo Institucional que tenemos aquí en la universidad, que va desde el 2016 hasta el 2020. Más o menos lo que es un periodo presidencial. Entonces tenemos como unas pautas allí que pues debemos estar muy claros para saber hacia dónde vamos todos. Entonces, dos de las categorías que se manejan o dos de los objetivos que se quieren alcanzar es liderazgo académico y visibilidad e impacto. Entonces, en cuanto al liderazgo académico, pues queremos contar con programas académicos basados en el desarrollo de competencias que sean evaluados de forma integral y sistemática con estándares internacionales bajo principios de calidad, innovación, flexibilidad, interdisciplinariedad, internacionalización y sostenibilidad. Queremos también realizar una revisión integral de los currículos, alinear los objetivos de los cursos, los programas, las prácticas docentes. Queremos fortalecer la presencia del idioma inglés en los programas de la universidad de acuerdo con la naturaleza de estos programas. Queremos ampliar y flexibilizar la oferta apoyada en tecnologías a través de medios virtuales y programas blended o híbridos, ¿cierto? Hay una apuesta bastante ambiciosa aquí, hay cuestiones de lengua, hay cuestiones de tecnología, hay interdisciplinariedad. Y además, pues, a través de todo esto queremos alcanzar mayor visibilidad e impacto a través de la internacionalización, sí, queremos hacer programas y proyectos conjuntos con universidades, organizaciones internacionales de muy alta calidad, construir redes de investigación, colaborar con profesores, egresados y estudiantes que incorporen todas estas prácticas de internacionalización. Te quería contextualizar un poquito como cuál es la apuesta de la universidad y ahora sí quiero hacerte la primera pregunta. ¿Cuál es el papel del inglés en el perfil del estudiante actual y del egresado uniandino? Tú has trabajado aquí en el departamento como profesora de inglés por varios semestres ya. Entonces, en tu opinión, ¿cuál es el papel del inglés en el perfil del estudiante?
So, from the perspective of just the general population, not only the students who take Cursos E, right? In general, I think students are very aware that to continue with their studies and to be successful in their fields, they are really going to need to be able to fluently speak English. And some students are arriving feeling that they fluently speak English and discovering that, that maybe they were not as very challenged in their high schools and they realize that they have a lot to make up. So I see the students as very motivated to learn. There's very few that I think have decided that it's a requirement and they're not going to invest a lot. I see a lot of interest and commitment from the students. I think, you know, it's sort of an argument you don't even have to make. Of course, you're going to need to speak English. And, you know, many have dreams to study in the US, Australia, Canada, the UK. And so they see this as a big opportunity. So I think we're very lucky in that way.
Sí, totalmente de acuerdo. Y bueno, pues leyendo un poquito lo de las políticas del el proyecto de desarrollo institucional, vemos que la presencia del inglés es importante para alcanzar lo que es la internacionalización. Pues tú has tenido experiencia en Brasil, en Estados Unidos, en Colombia. Tomando en cuenta todo eso, o sea, ¿qué significa la internacionalización de esta universidad?
Well, I see it happening everywhere already. That the university does a great job of bringing guest speakers, programs, you know, research groups from all over the world, and usually the working language will be in English. And so I see students seeing challenges in front of them, especially if they're still working on their English, because they really need to use it to, you know, to make these connections that the university is sort of offering to them. So whether it's, you know, guest speakers or a lot of departments now have English-speaking faculty who do speak Spanish, but much better English than Spanish because of their background. And so I think that in itself is an achievement because it's not something theoretical. It's not, you know, oh, I should be learning this. It's, oh, I have this one teacher and I think, you know, I really want to impress them. Yes, they speak Spanish, but I really want to impress them with my English so we can work on this project. I see a lot of utility for it within the school, not just thinking about the future.
Bueno, pues has hablado de muchas iniciativas que la universidad está implementando, como los guest speakers, bueno, los profesores visitantes.
Like Joe Biden.
Sí, exactamente, también, pues el hecho de traer un personaje tan importante para la política de los Estados Unidos aquí a la universidad para que diera una conferencia, los cursos como tal que se están ofreciendo en inglés, los miembros del cuerpo profesoral que se están contratando, ¿cierto? Entonces, pues has hablado mucho de lo que podría interpretarse como que es parte de la política de internacionalización de la universidad, ¿cierto? Por lo tanto, creo que podríamos hablar un poquito más hacia el futuro. Tú hablabas de lo que era, el presente ya está, pero pues ¿cuál será como el objetivo futuro? Pues, ¿crees tú que la universidad se convertirá en una universidad bilingüe, así como un colegio bilingüe?
Well, I think it's a possibility, but we would need to invest. We would need to invest a lot of time in my opinion, in some immersion programs, because we have some students who have arrived with not a lot of background in English. And some do really well in the program that we have here, and they're able to build and build and build and build. But unlike a bilingual school, we just don't have the contact hours at the moment. So thinking about the future, it could be bilingual, but it's a big gap between those students who are arriving not ready to participate, and having a fully, you know, a bilingual environment. So we would need to think carefully about that gap. I think it's a good goal to reach to be a fully bilingual school, but we would need to provide a lot of really intensive support for the students who are not prepared for that.
Okay. Es una buena manera de mirarlo a futuro para no tener tantos traumas, ¿cierto? De pronto en los colegios bilingües tienen un poco más de tiempo para llenar esos vacíos o esas brechas, pero aquí en la universidad el proceso es un poco más rápido. De todas maneras, vemos que estamos caminando fuertemente hacia lo que son los cursos de contenido en inglés, muchas veces no teniendo tan en cuenta esto de las brechas, de las barreras, pero bueno, sabemos que por el camino lo podemos ir solucionando. De todas maneras, en Asia se está documentando ampliamente sobre el impacto de la internacionalización y la imposición de los cursos en inglés como medio de enseñanza en el currículo universitario. Si vemos esta palabra, imposición, pues quizá pues por eso hacía como el énfasis ahorita. ¿Qué crees tú que va a suceder en nuestro caso y en Latinoamérica? Sí, sabemos que tenemos gaps, pero si hay una imposición, ¿qué va a suceder aquí en la universidad y en Latinoamérica?
So really the question is kind of what are the features that this would generate, maybe positive and both negative, of having a truly sort of international bilingual environment. Well, I do think that it's a big advantage for our students to sort of bring the world to them in a way, and English is a big part of that. Of course, also other foreign languages, French, German, are a big part of bringing opportunities to students so that they can take advantage of. I think it does create a challenge at the moment of making sure that we're being inclusive and really getting the best students, even if they haven't had the best preparation up to that point. I have an example. I have a student who is extraordinarily bright and extraordinarily focused and motivated, and he's here on a full scholarship. I think he went all through school on full scholarships, but his English is, he's very talented and works very hard, but he came to my office hours every time and said, I know it's good, but it's not good enough. I just don't have the practice, and I'm not where my classmates are. And I would give him exercises, and we would look at the work, and I think that was one of the classes where he got one of his lower grades. And I said, I can see that you're really hustling, but you just you don't have enough data to really get a sense of when something is correct or not, and you just need more time with it. And it's not a question of motivation, or it's just so I see students like that where we need to provide them with resources and time so that we don't lose those really good students who because really good students come from everywhere, right? And so we don't want to make that a barrier for entry.
Exactamente. Pero ¿qué pasaría en un caso contrario, donde por ejemplo tenemos muchos recursos, incluso buenos recursos humanos, con profesores muy comprometidos como tú, además muy competentes, que ofrecen sus horas de oficina y apoyo extra, pero los estudiantes, aunque tengan barreras, no los aprovechan? ¿Qué pasaría allí?
That's a challenging circumstance, and we've probably all seen that in a class where a student, or they have a big course load and they've just decided that English is not what they need to focus on, right? And so maybe they keep failing a level and they just kind of get stuck there. What kinds of responses do we have for that? And I think that right now the idea of just sort of eternally repeating a level is probably, after the second time repeating, there's probably something else that needs to happen. But we haven't fully developed that because we're still working towards this idea of we're still making structures for the language department.
Y quizá podríamos ya hacer un puente con la siguiente pregunta, hablando un poco de las perspectivas educativas y académicas sobre el inglés. Pues hablabas ahorita de que el departamento ha como creado algunas estrategias como para ayudar un poco a los estudiantes. ¿Podría ser un poco más específica con eso? ¿Qué iniciativas podrías destacar sobre el modelo de la enseñanza del inglés que está desarrollando la universidad? Y de lo que hay, pues ¿qué se podría mejorar? De pronto, okay.
Well, I think that coffee time has been a great step forward. It's it's really nice to know that when you're giving a challenging assignment, that to the weaker students, you're also giving, this is a challenging assignment and you have somewhere to go and you have someone to help you. And I usually make it obligatory the first time just so they all get in the habit of going, and then the students who need it will continue going. There are things that can be improved, but I think it's a huge advantage, kind of emotionally too, because there's a big emotional filter involved in learning a language, right? And to know that you can sit with someone in a kind of low stress environment and work it out with them, work out whatever doubts or whatever problems or questions you have. That is a big resource. So I think that's wonderful. And a lot of my students have taken advantage of it, and they've found it to be really helpful. In terms of what I would like to see beyond that, this is a dream. But I would love to see summer immersion programs. And I know that it's sort of that idea has been kicked around for a while. I imagine there are some financial considerations. But particularly for students who, they're getting stuck at a certain level, or they just have not had much instruction or contact with English, to give them the opportunity to spend 4 weeks or 6 weeks, even in a camp-like situation where they're just speaking English all of the time, I think is one way to really move that sort of stubborn group. Not that the students are stubborn, but that they're kind of stuck there, and really move them at least into the next level, right? And I think in particular, a lot of students have only been exposed to academic English, if they're coming from, not from bilingual schools, if they're coming from sort of general education. And so they're missing that whole part where, what is it like to speak conversationally in English? That's not a class that we teach. But it really helps when you go to write an essay to be able to say, well, how would I explain that to someone? And really using standard English and not sort of academic Spanish translated into academic English, which causes a lot of problems. And I think a lot of them are stuck in that pattern of like, I'll think about it in Spanish and then I'll translate it over to English. And academic English has, enough vocabulary that's similar that it'll like somewhat express what I want to say, but it's a really it's not really an answer to the problem.
Exactamente. Yo veo que de pronto en la parte de inglés académico se hacen esfuerzos aquí en la universidad y en general en Colombia para preparar al estudiante, pero cuando se trata de un inglés más natural, conversacional, ya ahí hay un poco de problemas. Está sugiriendo una escuela de verano, eso sería un sueño también. Entonces, pues sí, miremos a ver cómo se pueden unir el inglés académico y el inglés conversacional para ir a la siguiente pregunta.
Oh, and I have one more thing to add.
Oh.
The other thing about the summer school is during the school year, our students are really busy. They are, they're up to their eyeballs. We gotta use that in homework, in new concepts, in different challenges. And so I think the idea of just like give them more online work in English has some value, but it's really not addressing the root issue, which is that they really need to spend some time focusing on English and just interacting in English.
Bueno, sí, muy interesante tener el tiempo para de verdad enfocarse en esa parte de la interacción por un tiempo más o menos considerable. Valdría la pena ensayar y ver qué pasa. Listo. O sea, uno de los objetivos de los cursos es que la totalidad de los contenidos y las interacciones entre profesores y estudiantes sean siempre en inglés. ¿De qué manera crees tú que la comunidad uniandina, los estudiantes, los profesores, los administrativos incluso, se están preparando o no para cumplir esto? yo creo que tiene mucho que ver con lo que estás diciendo, porque en los cursos sí ya no solamente va a ser la parte de la parte académica, sino las interacciones. Se espera que entre ellos puedan comunicarse correctamente y con el profesor, si es un nativo o una persona que viene de otro país, de Noruega o de, ¿sí? Entonces, ¿cómo será que la universidad se está preparando para esto o no?
Well, I have the cursos I are a great opportunity because I do see students interacting in English. We, especially this semester, we're instituting like pair share, 2 or 3 times a class maybe. So the
¿Fue
teacher.
sugerencia tuya? Muy bien.
And so the teacher will ask a question. What do you think about this problem? And then instead of a traditional, lecture style where, the most prepared student will raise their hand, everyone spends 2 minutes, 3 minutes speaking in English to their to the person next to them, and they need to do it in English because afterwards we randomly call from the lists. So they may be the one who's speaking, so they have to prepare what they think in English, how they want to present that idea. So that is one way that I see this happening. And I know there's a lot of really good things going on in other cursos from our meetings. In terms of the university in general, coffee time is a really helpful thing, particularly at the moment when they need to write applications and things like that. That's also really helpful. Other than that, I don't know about other initiatives. Certainly there are some, but there are none that I have been involved in or that I've seen publicized.
Okay.
But I do know that there are a lot of international speakers, a lot of opportunities to interact with people from other backgrounds. Yeah.
En realidad yo creo que tú eres parte esencial de una de estas iniciativas y es el team teaching que estamos haciendo. Fíjate que pues el hecho de que tú hayas hecho una sugerencia y el profesor la haya aceptado y la hayan ensayado y esté funcionando es parte de esa preparación. Entonces sí, dijiste de pronto como un ejemplo que es como como te digo, como parece un caso aislado, pero en realidad no, o sea, todos ustedes son parte de esta iniciativa de llevar al salón de contenido un profesional en lenguas que pueda ayudar al profesor y a los estudiantes a prepararse para todo esto. Entonces,
and I think I see a lot of opportunity for that even in non-cursos where most of the readings are in English. Because students read them, but there's not necessarily. I mean, obviously there's content testing, but it's sort of unclear how deeply they're understanding depending on their level. And for a student who's less experienced, they really don't know what they're not understanding.
exacto.
So it would be interesting to work with teachers, even not in cursos thinking about how to present English texts and really understand who is fully grasping it and who is sort of like lots of words and here's the main idea, but not really understanding some of the finer points.
Correcto, muy bien. Listo. Bueno, pues a partir del sondeo que se realizó a finales del semestre pasado, tú trabajaste como profesor acompañante de cursos el semestre pasado. Entonces, a partir de un sondeo que se realizó, algunos profesores acompañantes manifestaron sentirse en el rol de monitores de los estudiantes en el curso. Tú eras acompañante el semestre pasado, vuelves a hacer este semestre. ¿Tú estás de acuerdo con esto? ¿Qué opinas de este comentario? Y si es el caso, ¿qué crees que se podría cambiar?
I think that there's still, I think that it's both a good and a bad thing that the roles are a little undefined right now, because a good thing in the sense that it gives us opportunities to sort of develop that relationship with the teacher and to with the profesor titular, with the main professor, and also look at opportunities because of the different subjects and because of the different kind of features of the classes, we may find that we have different, opportunities. But on the negative side of that, there is the possibility with an undefined role that that you end up in a space where maybe the students say, well, this person isn't grading my work, so why are they here, right? And I have a few anecdotes. So it really depends a lot too in the team teaching on the experience of the professor. Last time the professor was very sort of independent, and we made a plan, and but he wasn't, he didn't want to do a lot of brainstorming, for example. And I got in there and I think changed tweaked some things to make them better. But for the most part, it was sort of a good partnership, but like sort of independent. And I didn't, I didn't do a lot of jumping in. But this time around, I see that the professor has also just finished a course on teaching methods this summer, and he's really excited to try them out, but doesn't have a lot of experience. So he's sort of like, pair share. Like, here's how you would give the directions, here's how you start it, here's how you end it. And it's kind of remarkable that that's not part of professors' training in universities, but that's how it is.
Sí, correcto.
So I think I didn't feel like a monitor, but I can definitely see how that could happen. I can see the danger of that happening.
Entiendo. Y pues lo bueno es que has tenido experiencias distintas con los dos profesores con los que has trabajado, lo cual, no sé, de pronto la vez pasada eras un poco más inexperta trabajando con un profesor de contenido a nivel universitario. Ahora ya tienes un poco más de cancha, más experiencia, entonces, y el profesor puede que también sea un poco más abierto, entonces, y pues no, pues en cuanto a los monitores, no lo sentiste tú. De todas maneras, puedo yo inferir de lo que dijiste que el hecho de no tener un rol muy bien definido en el momento puede que tenga que ver algo con eso. Entonces el tiempo dirá más adelante si definir un poco mejor los roles nos dará como superar esto, ¿no? Listo. Dice, un objetivo clave de los cursos I es ayudar a los estudiantes a mejorar su competencia comunicativa y académica en inglés, o del uso del inglés académico. ¿Crees que todos los estudiantes, independientemente de su nivel de lengua, se están beneficiando de esta iniciativa? ¿Por qué sí o por qué no?
Okay. Let me reflect on the question for a moment. I think that all students are benefiting from this, but in different ways. For example, the great majority of the vast majority of our students tend to be pretty high level. I would say, for example, I just finished doing the diagnostic assessments. So I would say that we had about 70% of students that I'm not concerned about their level at all. And then I would say 25%, no, maybe less. 75% I'm not worried. 20%, I put them in the, like, let's keep an eye on them. Like, let's see how they do. And I may require them to come to my office hours. And then 5% each time, which ends up being maybe one student, we go, oh, yikes. And a lot of times they will retirar before we even get to talk to them. They will drop the course. But so obviously those 20%, they're going to have a lot of challenge and a lot of growth. And because their level, they can probably understand fine, but at the moment of producing, they have more problems. so that will help them to use, to produce, to communicate in English in a academic setting in a way that, in a genuine, authentic way, right? So that will be a good experience for them. For the 70%, I think they also get a lot out of it because even if their English is very good, there's still a lot of content vocabulary that that they need to work on. There's an infinite amount of vocabulary. So I think that it's useful. I've also noticed that these classes, at least from this past semester and this one, we usually have 5 or 6 foreign exchange students who generally tend to be from Europe and tend to have very high levels of English. So I think that can also be a nice experience too, and a not just nice, but a good growing experience for students who have strong English, but then they get to see someone who has even stronger English, and maybe to notice the different variations of English that they. So I think that it's a good experience for vocabulary and also contact with other English speakers, and even among students who say have gone to bilingual school, they have different accents because they've learned different, in different. So I think that it's also valuable to spend time interacting in English, working in teams in English, just to reinforce the vocabulary and navigate people who have learned a slightly different variety than they have.
Debo decir que me parece muy valioso lo que dices de que todos se benefician de una manera diferente, ¿cierto? Algunos para de verdad aprender porque están muy bajitos, otros para reforzar y otros para volar definitivamente y potencializar todo lo que saben. Listo. Pues yo creo que esta pregunta está muy relacionada con la anterior y bueno, tú hablabas de cómo se están beneficiando ahora, todos de verdad se están beneficiando en el presente. Pero, ¿cómo serán estos cursos útiles o necesarios para el futuro académico y profesional de los estudiantes en el ámbito internacional?
Well, especially in our case, especially we have administration students, and they are certainly going to do a lot of work with international companies, and I'm sure that, a very high level of English will be required for a lot of business jobs in Colombia and obviously outside of Colombia too. So I think English is going to be a big part of how they communicate. So it's helpful to have practice doing that within the classroom.
Y hablando un poquito acerca de ya las carreras, hablabas ahorita de administración. Pensemos en otras carreras de la universidad. ¿Crees tú que estos cursos son más o menos útiles para estudiantes y futuros profesionales de ciertas carreras o el tipo de carrera es irrelevante?
Okay, so let me think about that. More or less useful. I have a hard time thinking of any major where really speaking English well would not be a huge advantage. I mean, in the arts, you would, there's a lot of international work, a lot of scholarships and grants, and I really can't think of any major that would not benefit from speaking English.
Okay. Ahora, ¿crees tú que existe alguna diferencia profesional, académica o cultural entre el hecho de que el profesor del curso sea un hablante nativo o no nativo del inglés? Y cuando hablo del profesor del curso, hablo del profesor titular o el profesor de contenido. Y también, ¿crees que hay alguna diferencia en cuanto al profesor acompañante?
Okay, let me absorb that question just a moment. Okay, that's an interesting question. Um, I my general answer is no. All of my colleagues here have an extremely high level of English, and also certain advantages to having learned it that can be useful at the moment that you're teaching it to someone else who speaks your language, who speaks your same first language. There are moments when you can give, examples back and forth, and I've improved a lot at that, but it's a big advantage to be able to do that. Now, in terms of the perception of the students, that might be another thing. And, I mean, it's not, I don't consider it valid, but it is still something that, you will encounter. So I think that it does not make a difference, but I have noticed from our conversations that some non-native teachers feel like maybe students are giving them more attitude, or and I don't think that should stop them. I don't, the students need to get over it. But I think that, I mean, it's worth noticing that is a feature, and maybe that just means giving our profesor acompañantes, a role with a little bit more authority. That might, because it might be that a teacher who is a non-native speaker might suffer a little bit more from that very undefined role than a native.
Entiendo. Bueno, llegamos a la última pregunta. Dice, ¿qué identidades forjan los estudiantes uniandinos con respecto a estudiantes de otras partes? ¿Cree que el inglés tiene algo que ver?
Interesting. Okay. So we're talking about foreign exchange students here?
¿Qué identidades forjan los estudiantes uniandinos con respecto a otros estudiantes de otras partes? Sí, cómo se sienten ellos en comparación a estudiantes de otras partes que pueden ser estudiantes de intercambio.
Okay.
Y si el inglés tiene algo que ver en cuanto a cómo ellos se sienten al mirarse con estudiantes europeos o mexicanos o ¿sí?
Okay. So let's see. That's a good question. Well, I think naturally, especially among our students who haven't traveled, they're very impressed by the foreign students. If they haven't had a lot of contact, or they haven't traveled a lot. For students who have traveled a lot and have gone to bilingual schools, it's probably not a big phenomenon for them. But I think that it is really valuable to have these foreign students because they're able to offer perspectives that in the classes and probably interpersonally too, that we wouldn't encounter, you maybe wouldn't encounter otherwise. So I think they're a really big resource. And also the experience of explaining your culture or your history or some facet of being Colombian to a foreigner is also sort of an identity building experience. To say, what don't people understand about XYZ of being Colombian? So I think that it can really it has a really positive effect.
Okay. Bueno, Cait, muchísimas gracias por tu colaboración. Ha sido muy interesante tener esta entrevista contigo.
Gracias por la invitación.
Ok, gracias.